responsible for equality and liberty, Coalition for Human Rights, and the goal of R.E.A.L is to use the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a way to measure progress in human rights around the world. There have been so many horrible things over the past year. I chose this year, rather than come up with a litany of the horrible attacks and things that have happened around the world, focus on what we can do differently. And we wanted to focus on 5 or 6 short items. First one would be that a new hope would begin with ourselves. The concept being that despite the grave and just justices and days of darkness we've lived in as human beings, that we can make a difference in our world by starting with kindness and mercy as a basis for how we live in our lives. Atrocities depend on mean-spiritedness. They depend on hate. They depend on anger. The reality is, if we choose a different path, if we choose a path of kindness, we can move beyond the indifference that we may feel sometimes when we see all the horrible things come across in news or in the media about things happening to other people. Because when we embrace kindness in our heart and compassion in our heart, we recognize these are fellow human beings. They're not just numbers. They're not just a news story, but they're fellow human beings. So when we look to make change in our representation in governments or other countries around the world, we start off by setting an example within ourselves as the starting point of being responsible for a different set of values. Secondly, when we look at the issue of kindness and mercy, we do not have to choose a path of mean-spiritedness. It's a simple and possibly lazy point of view. We can choose the discipline and the strength that kindness and mercy to our fellow human beings matter, and not just those we like and those who are like us, but especially those we are not like and those who we may not like as well. It's important to offer an outstretched hand to our fellow human beings in kindness and mercy across our lives. And there is this addiction and normalization of mean-spiritedness in our media and society, and especially in social media, that if we're mean to one another, if we're cruel to one another, we're powerful. In fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Every time we choose a path of mean-spiritedness, we undermine our power. We undermine what we can do, not just as individuals, but as a society. Because we choose a path that divides and undermines who we are as human beings. But we have to choose a path of kindness and mercy, because at some point in time in all of our lives, we will be dependent on kindness and mercy. In fact, we are. Every minute when we go for food, we expect the food to not be poisoned. When we go to drive, we expect that people will stop. We expect that people will not run into us everywhere. We expect mercy and kindness and civility everywhere we go in our lives. It's part of our survival. It's not something we do because it's a nice thing to do. It's something we must do. Because without kindness and mercy, we as a society will not survive. So we have to look beyond the perversion that we've seen in recent years that have taken the golden rule, the concept do unto others as we will have them do unto you. And that means if people are mean to you, you should be mean back to them. No, that was not the idea. That was not the point of the golden rule. That's sort of a perversion of it. What we should do, if people are mean or cruel to us, we need to offer an outstretched hand to every upraised fist. Because we cannot keep fighting among ourselves and believe we will further a cause of human rights when we don't respect each other as fellow human beings. There is also the deception of violence. There is the belief that we can achieve progress by being violent to one another, by this addiction to violence, and violence is a path for normal change in our society. We have seen horrible, barbarous acts in the past several years that would shock the conscience of any human being that chooses to be kind. But when we decide not to be kind, we believe, well, they had it coming, or these people deserve it, or some horrible concept like that. But those are all wrong. They do not deserve it. The idea that we accept violence as something normal is something that is corrupting our spirit and our soul. One of the greatest leaders of nonviolence, Dr. Martin Luther King, believed that his children's life and wife's life was in danger. Now, Dr. Martin Luther King was the premier campaigner in the United States of nonviolence, completely. But he was looking at one point in time in his life to go out and buy a gun. That's how desperate he was for survival. And there are times when we all fear threats to our life. Now, he did not do this. He stepped back and said, no, how can I be an advocate for nonviolence when I go out and buy a gun? And this is the question we must ask ourselves on human rights. How can we be advocates for human rights and we go out and advocate violence? We advocate hatred. We advocate meanness. How can we be on one side say, oh, we believe in human rights, except we'll do anything to make them happen, including violence and meanness and cruelty and hatred? These are things that contradict one another. Dr. King saw this and he stopped. But even he was tempted to go that direction. So the deception of violence only makes humanity less and less safe. Finally, and the most important part, is the concept of love. We pursue love as something that is just simply romantic. But the reality is, love is life. Love is the inescapable network of mutuality tied into a single garment of death. Because if we're unable to open our hearts to love, we're unable to open our hearts to other parts of society and universal human rights. Love is life. Love is the network of life. Love is the destiny of life, the power and energy behind life. In fact, without love, there would be no humanity. Humanity would simply stop. That is how existential the concept of love is to our survival as human beings. This is not just some concept that would be nice to have. It is essential to live. It's our oxygen. It's our gravity. It's our moral compass. So when we look at the concepts of human rights, we look at kindness, we look at mercy, we look at nonviolence, and yes, we must accept the concept of love as grounding features as ways that we can change and be essentially consistent in our support for human rights, because we accept human people as valuable, as worthy. And where we make a mistake is we choose islands of isolation. We believe that we don't have to get along with people. We can we can be kind to people, we can, be merciful to people, but we don't really need to actually be with them. This does not help us in the cause for human rights. When we normalize the concept of isolating ourselves, as well as these other things, we no longer communicate. We no longer act like we're part of the system because we just don't want to be with them. We have to move beyond that concept that people say to us. They say, all you need to care about is yourself. As long as you're taking care of yourself, you've solved your problems. The truth is, you haven't begun. All you have done is the bare minimum that you need to do for yourself. If we are going to live in a society, we have to live as social individuals. And poets say, all you need is love. But from a human rights perspective, that's essentially true. You really do need to have love for one another as human beings. But you have to also move beyond the concept that islands of isolation are acceptable, because we cannot offer an outstretched hand to an upraised fist if we won't socialize with our fellow human beings. So we need to overcome those divisions that many want to promote between us. And finally, the last cause is we come together in a common cause as one humanity, not as Chinese people, not as American people, not as Pakistan people, not as women or men, not as any label of any sort. But we choose the cause of being one society. We choose the idea that love is life. We choose that we can make a change in the representations, the organizations, the other parts of the world, that we reject the actions because they are us. When we believe in the idea that they are us, now it's not like, well, I can't do something about these people because they're somebody else. No, they are us. We are one society. When we choose to believe we are one society, we find it's essential that we reach out to our representatives. It's essential that we have representatives. It's essential that governments and other organizations, military, etc., change because we are one. We decide that we will not accept the concept that they're over there and we're over here. But we are one people, one human race, and we are jointly responsible for equality and liberty.